Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our latest edition of USMNT Weekly. Yes, we're in an international break and Maurizio Pochettino's side have 2 tune-ups on the books over the next week. Today, we're going to check in with the roster, we're going to spotlight the players we're excited to see the most, and we're going to take a little look at the opponents, which are also my favourite sandwich filling, Turkey and Swiss. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, your regular USMNT Weekly crew, starting with Mr. Taylor Rockwell. Hello, Taylor Rockwell.
Hello, shall I keep it going? If you eat that sandwich, you avoid any grease.
Oh,
and then you won't be hungry, right? That's the other one. Graham, your turn.
I've got nothing. I like cheese and ham too.
But not together. In a Baby Bell form. We've learned this.
We have, yeah.
Ham and cheese in toasted form, Graham, or
Oh, yeah.
untoasted?
As in a panini, it's like British law. From the early 2000s, everyone was panini daft. So, yeah, you don't have a choice in this country, unfortunately.
Wow.
That might be a land speed record for going off the rails on this show. But I'm proud of us for doing it. I'm proud of us.
You'd never tell that we're at the start of an international break that's starting with 2 friendlies and a tournament that we're not sure if we care that much about. Yeah, you'd never tell.
Stick with us for the next 45 or so. Joe Lowery, how are you?
Hey, Ryan, I'm great. I was doing better before. I'm hoping this was a joke. Let me just put it this way. I'm hoping that your turkey and Swiss as the best sandwich combo is a joke. Surely you don't mean that, do you?
Well, how about a turkey and Swiss melt? Is that not good?
I mean, I'm not saying it's bad, but you said it's your favorite sandwich combo, and you didn't say
hot dog is
salami,
obviously
and
the
also
best sandwich,
Swiss.
right?
Swiss is an extremely overrated cheese. So I was just trying to figure out where exactly you landed on all this. Ham trumps turkey. Sorry, salami trumps them both, but as an accent meat, first of all. And Swiss is like a subtle cheese that, frankly, I'm not getting a lot from.
I'm on board with the meat rankings.
Yeah,
to be
baby.
fair, the Swiss one's maybe a little bit bold. I do like a bit of Swiss, but the meat, I'm right there with you, Joe.
Joe,
so to speak.
The US aren't playing ham and cheddar.
All right, I had to make sure it was for the bit. That's all. Ryan, I'm worried for you culinarily. I just want to put it that way.
I appreciate your culinary concerns, Joe,
Yeah.
but I put turkey above ham. It's leaner.
No,
That's fine.
bro.
Go for it. More ham for Graham and I.
Fine.
rum ham.
Rum ham.
Rum ham
Rum,
obviously trumps
ham all the way.
Obviously. All right. For more of this kind of chat, you can join our TSS Plus feed. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show is where all our bonus content is. Bonus episodes, bonus video, access to our Discord server where all the cool kids are hanging out. Patreon.com/ what is it, Joe?
Football ramble.
Yeah, that's it. There we go. Good job. All right, Rails, see you later. The Rails are a dot to us now, frankly.
Oh, a snort from someone as well.
Boy. Okay, all right. Back on track.
Here we go. USMNT Weekly. Let's get into it, Taylor. The squad, the roster, it seems like it is moments from having you called up at this point, Taylor. Folarin Balogun is out. Who else is out? Juwan Jones is out. Sean Zordaski is out. Patrick Schulte is out. Yeah, what's going on, Taylor?
What's going on is coming up with the players I'm most excited for and kind of scrolling from bottom to top of that list and then starting over because there's a lot of names missing, Ryan. A lot due to injury, a few due to accumulation of fixtures, a few due to personal reasons. But we do have a very experimental team. You are not wrong that it does feel like at least a few of these guys, like Maurizio Pochettino, did not know their name, and someone else had to kind of write it in on the roster for him. Nevertheless, I think when you look at it for what it is, and then for the things that Pochettino has said about this team, about what the identity of this team needs to be, I think there is still reason to be excited about this tournament and this team. It is just not... be excited in a different way, I would say. Like, instead of being excited about seeing all of our guys together to see how strong they can be against perceived weaker regional opposition, I see it more as that same opposition, but now it's guys with a point to prove and guys who've been there for a while who are steadying the ship, and to see how steadied that ship can be, but still how entertaining it can be, I think, with a coach who has something to prove. That's how I'm choosing to approach this camp.
Joe, would you care to lay out the table for us for who's actually missing and who's stepped in their stead? I can do it if you like. But
No, I'm happy to do it. The Balogun one, I think, is interesting because he was one of the players that was sort of a lifeline for this initial group of, at least there's Folarin Balogun, where we'll learn more about who's going to be the number 9 for this team. And Pepe's not in this camp. This is a real chance for Balogun to go and to show himself while Pepe's injured. Well, yeah, joke's on all of us, I suppose. It has been, to pause on Balogun for just a second, it's been a horrible injury year for him. He's played about 600 minutes in Liga this year. That's it. shoulder, easy for me to say, shoulder surgery. That was just an absolute nightmare on my part that I want to move past very, very quickly.
I think Joe's injured as well. He's off the roster too.
That's like an all-timer. Could not get out of my own way.
Do it now.
Shoulder surgery. Dislocated shoulder after being out for 2 months earlier this year, and then he missed time after that surgery. Nailed it. Now there's an ankle injury. It's a bad day to be me, apparently. It's a bad day to be Folarin Balogun. It's a great day to be Brian White, Pat ARJOON, or Damian Downs. When Poch announces this squad, there are 4 strikers in it, plus Haji Wright, so basically 5 strikers in this team. And now it's down to 4 with really 3 main guys fighting for that spot. One of those guys is going to have an opportunity to lead the line for the U.S. in games against some good teams this summer, which is not probably what they thought was in the cards for them, but here we are. So no Balogun. And of that newer crop, he is obviously the most notable absence. DeJuan Jones probably wasn't in line for big minutes this summer. Sean Zawadzki, same. The incoming players, very quickly before I get to the other guys. Paxton Aronson's here, Nathan Harriel's here, Walker Zimmerman is here. None of those guys really do much for me, if I'm being honest. The Zimmerman angle is a fun story because he's been out with a head injury. He suffered a pretty nasty concussion against Charlotte back in April and just got back and made his first start of the weekend against NYCFC. So I'm happy to see Zimmerman back and taking advantage of this opportunity to be with the national team. I don't think he or Harriel or Paxton Aronson are probably in line for big minutes. Paxton's got the biggest chances to play here. The other absences, which we've talked about before, so I don't need to spend long on it. There's no Ricardo Pepi. Obviously, he's still injured. There's no Christian Pulisic. There's no Tim Weah. There's no Weston McKennie. There's no Jedi Robinson. There's no Gio Reyna. And there's no Yunus Musa. For those of you following along at home, that means the U.S. is missing their top 2 strikers, their top 2 wingers, their best box-to-box center mid, their starting left back, and then Gio Reyna and Yunus Musa, who are probably fighting somewhere for that 3rd center mid spot. Maybe Gio Reyna is fighting for the last bench spot. Who knows? That's a lot of absences. To Taylor's point, this is now very much not, oh, wow, let's see like how close the U.S. is to doing something in the World Cup. No, that's rolled up into a little tight paper ball and tossed into the garbage can. This summer is about finding players who can help you when those players are also in the team, not like, oh, let's see how good this team is playing under Pochettino. Like that stuff's out the door.
And I think to further emphasize the point Joe's making there, like I think if you are just coming back to the U.S. or if you've been kind of nominally paying attention, welcome. It's a weird time because Mauricio Pochettino, I don't think, has had the start that he anticipated. I don't think the player pool has been as strong or as deep as he might have anticipated. And so heading into this Gold Cup, like I think even if you did have your full choice roster, I'm still not sure who he starts in a few different positions. I think things are more open than they have been in a very long time.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think that sets the stage for these players who, like I never would have felt fully comfortable being like, yeah, Pat ARJOON, Brian White, Damian Downs, let's score some goals, fellas. And now we're in that position where if one of them does, if one of them looks like they understand the system and can score a goal and play well, they might be the number 9. Like, things are very wide open, and I think that does make this roster more exciting than it would be if things were more stable and set.
Yeah, and that's where I personally draw some enthusiasm for this summer. I'm bored watching the first choice USMNT sides coming out of the March window, which was bad. And look, maybe you wouldn't want to throw so much of the framework out because it's going to be difficult now if you're dropping in a couple of players that you would like a look at ahead of the World Cup next year. It's difficult to assess and judge them meaningfully when basically the framework, there's no framework at all to this team. And they might have to change shape and formation that Poch has a certain idea ahead of the World Cup next summer. Maybe we're going to see a back 3 with wing backs in this window because there's no wide players higher up the pitch and he doesn't really have much of another option. So that's not ideal, but nonetheless, I'm still looking forward to seeing a good number of players in this roster. And what is a competitive setting? Like, there is a trophy up for grabs. There will be rivalry games, or we hope there will be rivalry games for the US out of this tournament. So, yeah, I was... It's been slightly facetious at the top of the show. I still think there are things to look forward to and be interested by.
Were you being facetious with the board of the first choice 11 for the US? Because when was the last time we actually saw that fully?
Well, March would be the...
Did we?
Well, it was in body, maybe not in spirit, in that window. But yeah, like that, and it's not just the March window. Going back to the Copa America last summer, like that wasn't a fun experience. So this has been bubbling away for a while for the US, and so yeah, I am interested to see some outsiders get their opportunity.
Yeah, and one other wrinkle from these roster changes. I know I said DeJuan Jones was not nearly as notable as Folarin Balogun. He's not in this context. But his exit from this roster means that Max Arfston is probably the only other left back, like pure left back in this team. And DeJuan Jones isn't even a pure left back. He's a right-footed player who's playing on the right now for his club team in San Jose. But really it was, when you look at the roster, it was Freeman and Dest as the obvious right backs. It was Arfston and Jones probably as the left backs, with Dest also obviously being able to moonlight on that left side like we've seen before. Now that DeJuan Jones is gone and Harriel's here, who's also a right-sided defender, right-footed, either plays right back or right center back, mostly right back for the Union, you'd have to imagine that Dest has some left back minutes in him this summer. I don't know what Dest's fitness situation is.
Alex Freeman minutes.
Yeah, that's where I'm leading, Graham. Don't worry. Like Dest is surely going to play some at left back because I just cannot fathom running Max Arfston for every single one of these games. Now, I don't know, maybe Arfston, who's been reportedly a target of interest from Toulouse over in Liga, maybe he's thinking this is my summer and he's going to bring it. That's possible. I like Max Arfston. I think he's a good player. He has not really shown that at all for the U.S. across his January camp minutes earlier this year and back in March. He's looked a step or two off the pace relative to a lot of other players in this U.S. squad. And I don't think Poch is going to disagree with that assessment, frankly. Although he disagrees with it to an extent because he actually brought Max Arfston back into this camp over John Tolkien and Caleb Wiley. But I'm thinking we're going to see Dest at left back now that DeJuan Jones is not a reserve option there. And we're going to see more of Alex Freeman. The other wild card is Tim Ream, who obviously plays left back for Charlotte FC, as Ryan reminds us. I'm kind of ready to be done with that. I'm definitely ready to be done with that in this setting where there is no one higher up the field that you say, oh, I'm going to take advantage of Tim Ream's stay-at-home ability, and he's going to distribute and find the player up on the left wing. He's going to sit back and maintain a rest defense structure. You're not going to do that so Haji Wright has the whole wing to himself. That's not going to be a tactical calculation, I think, that's made often, at least this summer. So I am thinking we're going to see some Dest left back minutes. And in general, I'm glad to see Dest back with this team. He's a player who missed in March, has been missing for a while. It's nice to see his name, even with a lot of his pals not around.
I did enjoy Doug McIntyre's report on the latest on the squad. DeJuan Jones, he said, has what the Federation has called a lower body injury. Is that the most vague description of an injury you've ever heard? Like, is it his toe? Is it his groin? It's like half his body.
He's hurt his balls. I'm trying to word it in a more tactile way.
But if you went to the doctor, Graham, and they said, I'm afraid you have a lower body injury, you'd be like, right.
Well, I think we know what Graham would think. He just told us what he would be concerned about.
There's a whole half, to be fair. Lower body. Could be anything from...
To me, that just says the media person couldn't remember what part of the leg it was and couldn't just say leg. Like, that would be even more disconcerting, so they just had to go lower body.
What do you call that again? Lower body.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you've hurt your leg bone. Sorry about that. Okay, so... Taylor, how are we feeling about this? Let's go this way. Who do you think is going to step up in the number 9 slot, given the current roster?
Oh, you. My question was going to be, Joe, of these number 9s, who are you most comfortable starting, and how comfortable are you actually? But you preempted me. Well done, Ryan.
Welcome.
I think it's Pat ARJOON, just because he's been there and has played for Pochettino. But I say that with the level of question marks you can hear in my voice, because I really think it could be anybody. Joe has previously gone over why Brian White might not be the solution, but here he is, and he's been the solution for
He's
Vancouver.
not the solution, to be clear.
There
It's not a might.
Which then makes it like, is it Damian Downs? Do we get to see him? It feels unlikely, but maybe if he's starting, that shows how well he responded in training. Maybe it's Haji Wright. Maybe it's something else entirely. And so, like, there's a lot of maybes in there. I end up with, I guess it's Pat ARJOON, and we'll see how it goes. It just, that doesn't feel like the profile, the player profile of striker that Pochettino has wanted, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's exactly what he needs.
Well, and I want to go back to what I said there. It's not even intended to be a slight at Brian White, even though it sounds like it. Brian White's not the solution because none of these guys are the solution to the U.S.'s like ethereal number 9 problems. Their problems are that they can't feed the striker the ball regardless of who it is. Like, it doesn't matter if it's Balogun or if it's Pepe. The U.S. is not getting production out of that spot. Has not, I'll put it that way, gotten production out of that spot. It is that simple. Brian White is clearly not as well-rounded a player as Folarin Balogun. He clearly does not have the same athletic ability as Ricardo Pepi and some of the same even hold-up play as Pepi, although I do think that is a strength of Brian White's game. Brian White is not going to brute force goals for the USMNT because he's not that kind of player, and the U.S. doesn't have that kind of player. Like, there are only a few of those guys on the planet. And Graham, you talk about this all the time. Like, there's only a few of those 9s that you can really go out there and say, this guy's going to, at a reliably high level, every single game, cause regular problems for the opposing defense. Brian White's not going to do that because if Balogun and Pepe aren't doing that, and I do think Balogun's come the closest, by the way. It's a shame we're not going to see him this summer. Because if those guys aren't doing that, he's not going to do it either.
Joe, how then do you determine like the number 9 that you want to see? If the issue is service, if the issue is supply, if the issue is the players around them, then even if a player does score multiple goals a game in this tournament, are you seeing that as, well, that guy cemented the spot, or are you seeing it as, oh, the system's working, the players around him are working, and so he finished well? Like, what is your sort of criteria then for feeling comfortable about who's starting at number 9?
Yeah, the reality in this tournament, Taylor, is I don't think I'm going to see enough from any of these players against these opponents to think, oh, this guy's the guy. Maybe that's not true because there are, I don't know, it could be up to 4 games against some pretty good teams in this competition when you think about even before the tournament starts, the Turkey and Swiss sandwich games, and then you have Canada and Mexico potentially that you could meet later on. That's a decent sample size of games that we could see from these players. So I don't want to rule it out entirely, but I think it's unlikely that I come away from this tournament thinking, wow, Damian Downs, come on down. Like I want you starting in LA next summer. I don't think that's probably going to happen. There are things that I look for from a number 9 as far as like my ability to think that they are higher up the pecking order. Their off-ball movement, in possession, how they're finding space in the box, even if that ball is not coming in, how aggressive they are and how clever they are about picking up pockets of space. You can evaluate some of their hold-up play and their actual touches of the ball and how they contribute in possession. Certainly their pressing as well, which we talked about with Josh Sargent maybe not being a real strong suit back in that March window recently. And the other thing in all of this, and the reason why Balogun has been such a player that I've enjoyed and have still a lot of belief in for the U.S., is that he does create some of his own shots. A guy who's played as a winger for a decent chunk of minutes in his career, can generate shots cutting in and getting the ball on his right foot, is clever and composed inside the 18 where he can take a sort of a chop, move the ball from one foot to the other, create separation between him and a defender. I don't think we see that from Brian White, even though Brian White is a very good striker in Major League Soccer. We don't see that yet reliably from Pat ARJOON, although he does have some of those shifty dribbling skills. If the U.S. can find a player who can create some of their own shots, that's huge because we have enough data that says the players around that player, that 9, cannot reliably do that job for them.
Is on the other side of the field, Graham, is there any question over goalkeeper? Is it Matt Turner at this point?
Well, Pochettino has certainly raised the question of who the goalkeeper will be for the Gold Cup. He has given an interview to Landon Donovan and Tim Howard's podcast called Unfiltered recently. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things he said on that show later in the episode. But he has he said in that episode that Matt Turner needs to start finding minutes to be ready for the Gold Cup now, for the World Cup, excuse me. Now that might mean that he does still play this summer, but the fact that he has raised that question says to me that it's not a cemented position. Not that we ever thought that it was. I remember when Pochettino first came in, there was a question of, is it Patrick Schulte who's going to be ahead of Matt Turner, maybe slightly better on the ball, although that's maybe marginal, over Matt Turner. And then Matt Turner has just played every single game under Pochettino, so it still feels like it's his jersey to lose, but there is scope for him to potentially lose it if he has another couple of bad games.
Was that an unfiltered opinion? Felt quite filtered to me. Just going to say it.
Well, that's why I'm not on that show, Ryan. If it was unfiltered,
Indeed.
I'd be on there.
All right, let's take a quick break, why don't we? When we come back, we're going to talk about the players we're most excited to see at this summer's Gold Cup. Do join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to USMNT Weekly. Positivity Central over here, Joe Lowery. We're going to start talking about the players we're most excited to see at this summer's Gold Cup, where a Gold Cup is up for grabs. Joe, would you like to kick us off with a selection of the players? Maybe just start with one you're most excited to see. What are you thinking?
I'm going to go ahead and bet, by the way, that I have a perfect overlap with one of my other 2 analysts on today's show. I don't know who it's going to be. I'm just going to say that I think there's going to be a 3 for 3. I'm going to start off with Serginho Dest. Is Dest on anybody else's list? Yeah, yes, Taylor's nodding. Here. Graham's nodding. All right, let's go, fellas.
That felt like destiny.
Joe, do you want to do all 3 now so we can see? Because I want to see what the overlap is.
No, hold it.
All right, I'll hold it. It's been 15 months. It's been 15 months since we've seen Serginho Dest with the U.S. men's national team. It was March of 2024. A newsflash, we're in June 2025, people, even though I forgot that it was June for a good solid 60 hours or so into the new month. I am stoked that we get Serginho Dest back into this team. We've talked about him a little bit already, and I mentioned how he could play some on the left. We could see him on the right. I also do want to caution a little bit. We should take what Mauricio Pochettino says with a few grains of salt because I don't know that there's been a ton of congruence in some of his comments so far. But Pochettino has talked about how he's not going to just obsess over the short-term window with Dest, which I think makes sense coming off of all those injuries that he's dealt with. The ACL tear working his way back into the team at PSV, then another little setback in there. He's not going to just rush Dest into a ton of minutes for the sake of going out there and winning these games, which is fair enough. But we are going to see Dest at some point in this window. We could see him on the right. We could see him on the left. Who knows? Honestly, we've never seen Serginho Dest play for Mauricio Pochettino, and he is probably the most talented offensive player, at least most press-resistant player in this group. We know how good Serginho Dest can be on the ball, and I think we saw how much they missed him in Jetta Robinson back in March. Still no Jetta Robinson, but our opportunity to see what Pochettino thinks of Dest and how he wants to use him, even in this B-team kind of context. Yeah, I'm stoked about that because I love Serginho Dest. He's a great player, and he's a starter when this team's fully healthy.
Very good. Graham, Dest, excited?
Yes, very much so. I think he has the potential to completely change the dynamic of the US down that right side. Until now, Poch has, at least in a few matches, used like two players for a one-player solution between Scally and Yunus Musa, and so it's exciting to get Dest in there, and that's one player all of a sudden, and that potentially frees up more space elsewhere in the team. So that's positive for the US. It's a shame that Jedi's not going to be on the other side, because I think you run the risk now in this tournament of shifting the dominance from the left side to the right side rather than just having that balance between the two where you can go in both directions to build out from the back. But yeah, having Dest back in this team is undoubtedly a positive.
Yeah. Taylor, do you feel like he's got MVP potential for this team?
Yes, I think he also has potential to play 15 minutes, and I think he also has potential to remind us all that Serginho Dest can be a problem sometimes in possession. So, like, that is where I am with Dest, and why he is number one on my list for excitement, is because I think there is always with him that potential that he could, cut inside and unleash a cracker from 30 yards out and score, but he could also be a little bit chaotic at times in defense or in possession. But I think he brings so much variety to the U.S. attack and so much spark, and I think so much belief, and that feels like a thing that U.S. players haven't had in recent camps. And I think somebody who's backing themselves to make things happen and trying stuff, even if it leaves the U.S. in a precarious position sometimes, I think they've been a little risk-averse, is my sort of general feeling, and I don't think that's a thing you could ever accuse Serginho Dest of being.
Do we think Serginho Dest knows that the others aren't turning up? There's always that one guy in the group chat who you never hear. If you're going on a night out and it's like, is such and such coming? I don't know. They'll see if they turn up. Serginho Dest seems like that person.
He 1,000% does.
And not going to know that the others aren't going to be there.
But
where's Christian?
He also seems like the guy who would show up and be like, oh, they're not here? All right. And on they go. He's that guy, too. He's not really bothered by it either, but I think is also definitely not checking the group chat updates until the day of.
Yo, Poch doesn't like Gio? What? I didn't even know about that.
That's crazy.
Joe, your second player you're most excited about, please.
All right, I'm 100% overlapping with Graham on this. Diego Luna is next on my list.
2.
Yeah, maybe. Taylor, yes, no, maybe so?
No for me.
Wow, so not there are only two men of culture on this podcast. Understood. I want to see what Diego Luna looks like.
Joe, I like a spider neck tattoo as much as the last man.
Sorry, 3. My mistake, Ryan. You're probably a Dutch Bros guy too. I can see that. Diego Luna, I want to see what he looks like with more talent around him, because he's still putting up goal-scoring numbers this year for RSL. He's been very effective in that way. He has not created a ton of clear-cut chances, which seems odd given what my impression of Diego Luna's game is, and I've watched Diego Luna for longer than he's been a professional soccer player. Like we shared some air in Casa Grande. I want to put it that way, folks. I'm a big Diego Luna guy. I'm a big believer in his game. And when you watch him, it is that close control. It's his ability to play passes in tight spots and his vision that I think really does stand out. And we saw some of that back in the March window where he's moving off the ball wisely to go and find space in the box, and then is just so calm to do that last little bit to find ARJOON for the goal. Diego Luna can do that stuff. He has not had a lot of opportunities to do that stuff and hasn't really been doing some of it with RSL this year because RSL are really bad. That's the reality for them at the moment. They don't have a lot of other attacking talent around him. Diego Luna, I think Jeff talked about this on yesterday's show. He's been sort of thrust into being the man, which I like. I think that's a good responsibility for more U.S. players to have. But it also means that he doesn't have a lot of help in the attack, and that some of his numbers and even performances have not been quite as well-rounded as you might have expected of a player who's garnered as much hype and attention as Diego Luna has. So even though this is not the U.S.'s best group, and I think Luna will play up to the level of guys around him, that he has other players besides his regular, frankly, not quite always up to the standard RSL teammates to play with in this window, I think is super exciting. Toss in the fact that he's going to be a go-to player for Pochettino. I think we have enough evidence to say that at this point.
Yeah.
The fact that he's going to be in a lot of these minutes, and it's not a McGlynn or a Berhalter or a Sullivan or all these guys that sort of feel like they're in the midfield hat of you can just reach in and draw a name out and that player could get minutes or they might not get minutes. Luna, it seems like, is going to get minutes this summer, and I'm really interested to see a larger sample size of what he looks like for the U.S.
He's one of Poch's guys at this point. I went looking, Joe, you might be able to cite this interview. I saw someone on social media yesterday, Luna giving an interview talking about the broken nose moment and him saying, I couldn't then find it when I went looking for it again.
I saw that too, shoot, yeah.
I apologise to whomever conducted that interview. I can't remember where I saw it, but basically he was talking about not just his performances in the January window, but the broken nose moment where he refuses to come off and stays on for the rest of the first half in that game. He talks about that as being the moment he kind of proved himself to Pochettino, and that is it with Diego Luna. It's not just his performances, and he is watching Diego Luna, particularly in the March window. He seemed like, I said this at the time, he seemed like one of the very few players who understood what was on the line. So he is barreling around the pitch, and that's a kind of quality that I think the US are lacking. But even just in terms of his buy-in, his I hate using this term because it gets used by proper football men, but fight, I guess, is an appropriate term when you're talking about Diego Luna. So yeah, I'm just always excited to see Diego Luna play at the moment, and I'm looking forward to having more evidence of him in this US team.
If it helps, Graham, I think it's the overusage of fight and the over-reliance on a team needing fight over, say, a midfielder who can pass the ball. That is when fight maybe gets overused. I think in the context of this U.S. team, that is a thing that has been lacking. I don't know how you measure that. Joe, is their expected fight? Is that a stat?
XF.
There we go. They're underperforming their XF, put it that way. So I think in this case, it's an appropriate usage and an appropriate thing that this team needs.
Taylor, is he not on your list of players you're excited about? Are you worried that we're trying to make fetch happen a little bit with Diego Luna or something like that?
In which way?
In the way that is he Poch's man, or is he the man that's there in front of Poch?
I'm still not sure I know the difference.
It sounded really smart, though, when he said it, didn't it?
It really
did. Are we building him up to a point where when the World Cup comes next summer, he doesn't have much of an impact because he's playing for RSL and MLS? Like, has he looked good so far because of the competition that's been ahead of him? Is that the
Thank you
point?
for articulating exactly what I was trying to say.
Here is the true answer and what I am struggling with. I don't know why it did not occur to me to put him on my list, and I don't know what to make of that because I've really enjoyed Diego Luna. I have been his hype man at times, I think, and yet I didn't put him on there, and I can't tell if that's because I just expect him to be there now, and so I'm less excited to see him, if that makes any sense. Like, he's on the lineup, so he's in there. He's not a guy that I think about otherwise. Or is it that I still don't really think he is the man? I'm not really sure, and I think maybe that kind of sets the stage for me. Because if he's starting and drifting, Joe, we would assume he's going to drift towards the left, right?
Yeah, he tends to, but he can drift anywhere he wants, really.
And if we have Dest maybe starting at left back, then we've got Dest and Luna kind of occupying similar spaces, and I just think that could be very fun. And that is the thing where if those two are creating and combining, I start to maybe be even more excited about Diego Luna. And so I think in the end I expect him to be there, but I'm not sure if he is there because he's the guy or if it's because he has been the only guy who can do the job so far, which is maybe what Ryan was trying to say 4 different times.
I take that point, but that's kind of where my excitement comes from with Diego Luna is after coming at the January camp, it was like, right, well, let's see you do it with the first choice team in March, and he was one of the very few players who did do that. So he has made that step up every time it's been asked of him, and this is another, despite the fact he's lost a lot of the guys around him, we're going to be playing Switzerland and Turkey, so that is a step up, and then it's a competitive tournament. So that's where the excitement comes from, is the prospect of seeing him make that progression.
And I think genuinely what this conversation is revealing to me is how much the starting 11 is still sort of set in my head. That when you have a first choice squad, I feel like you can pick like a number of those starters, maybe like 9 of the 11, 10 of the 11. And as I said in the introduction, I think that is like the least it has been the case for me in a long time. And so I'm then doing that math of like, is it Luna? Like, really? Is Luna going to start in that midfield for me? And I think that's where I am with him. He probably is, but that means somebody who's been starting there and has been kind of written in ink is no longer written in ink, and that feels strange, but necessary.
Joe, let's have one more player from you that you're excited about, if you will.
I don't really want to do this again, so I'm just going to say the name and then maybe have someone else finish it. Alex Freeman, is he on anybody's list? All right, I'm done. Who wants to take this? I did this yesterday. I've done it 100 times. I feel like people are tired of hearing me.
Yeah, I'll take this one, Joe. Yeah, of the young players in this team who haven't yet broken through into the first choice roster, I think Alex Freeman has to be near the top of the list for players who potentially could go to the World Cup next year. Now, I haven't watched as much of him as Joe has, but every time I catch Orlando, and I do tend to catch them fairly regularly.
We know.
Isn't it your spiritual home?
Yeah. He's a standout player for Orlando every single time that I watch Orlando, and he has got everything that you would want from a modern fullback, right? He's physical, way beyond his age. 18 years old, Joe?
I think he's 20. Yeah, I think he's 20.
Right, okay, yeah, a little bit older than I thought. But he's still obviously very, very young. He's technically good. He can cross. He can play his role in possession. He can get forward. He even poses a threat in the air when he gets into the box. He's scored a couple goals this season with his head. And while Joe Scally has made a decent impression under Pochettino, Freeman's a totally different kind of right back and also hasn't made such an impression that he's untouchable. So I think if you have Dest as the first choice, with Freeman, as the understudy, and then Scally as someone who can play that position, a little bit differently, but can also give you an option in the back three. I actually think all of a sudden between those options, and look, I'm maybe jumping ahead here where we haven't even seen Alex Freeman pull on a USMNT shirt yet, but theoretically between those three, the US looks pretty well stocked at right back all of a sudden.
Graham, I want to ask you about that then for a moment, because if he, who did you say was number 2 right now? You said Scally, right?
Yeah, Scally has had that position.
So number 2 that Poch didn't call him up this window.
That's the question.
Locked in. Number 2 pencil, Joe Scally.
Graham, does that mean that you're seeing him as a player who maybe was also like given a rest because of minutes, or do you?
No,
because
no.
I'm reading that much more as like Scally seems to be a guy who didn't impress in training, to put it mildly, and so is not being called in.
I don't have a great read on that. It sounds like Joe maybe has a better read on that. I mean, he has played a bunch for Gladbach. He's the first team starter, so I would have said it was a potential, but Joe, you kind of jumped in.
Yeah, I mean, I
think
think Poch listed a whole bunch of players and did not specify that, unlike Yunus Musa, that it was for personal reasons or anything along those lines. Scally was in the Josh Sargent, Tanner Tessman CCV group of guys that were not called in because they were not called in by Poch.
Yeah, on that note, I think if they take odds on is Josh Sargent going to be at the World Cup, I would take the no on that one. Because for this number 9 pool to be what it is, and for him still not to get a call up, even with the injury to Balogun, I think tells you a lot about how Pochettino sees him. And I think that might go for Joe Scally as well. So I think there's a scenario in which Freeman is auditioning for, like at minimum, that backup job. If Dest can't go, or if Jetta can't go and Dest has to play left back, can Freeman step up and do it? I think this is an opportunity for him to prove that at the very least he belongs at this level.
And Graham, I do take your point, though, as far as a difference in playing styles.
Yeah.
Joe Scally is a very different player than Freeman and Dest. Like, Freeman is closer to Dest than he is to Scally in terms of how he approaches the game. Maybe not in terms of his overall impact just yet, but also maybe in terms of his overall impact. Scally is a stay-at-home guy. Like he's going to make his money in the Bundesliga for another decade, doing exactly what he's been doing for the last 3 years. Right? He is going to be a stay-at-home player who doesn't really make huge, obvious mistakes, is fairly reliable defensively, and doesn't contribute much in the attack. That's Joe Scally. Freeman is, I'm going to get forward, I'm going to tuck into the half spaces, or I'm going to get wide, I'm going to get to the end line, I'm going to create and really involve myself in the attack. He's 6'3". You're talking about him being a header threat. He absolutely is, and he can crash at the back post and score goals. So Alex Freeman will get forward in a roster for a tournament that matters more than the Gold Cup. I could see Pochettino going back to the Joe Scally well and having a guy who's going to stay at home and be somewhat reliable defensively. I don't know that I'm quite ready for that, and what Alex Freeman does in this summer could maybe dissuade me from that opinion that, yeah, Scally might come back in at some point. We'll see. But very different profiles to the point where you could understand bringing all 3 players to a tournament with a 26-man roster and thinking that it's not totally redundant.
Graham, if I'm not mistaken, did your players you're excited about perfectly match Mr. Lowry's?
Yeah, it did. 3 for 3. But I'll give you a couple of honourable mentions as well.
Wait, I have one more space, I think,
Taylor.
because I didn't have Luna and Graham. I think there will be overlap here. Because in your honourable mentions, that's basically a grouping I have, and that is my third thing I'm most excited for. I call them the not quite all-stars. The Malik Tillmans, the Johnny Cardosos, the Chris Richards of the squad who have been there, been given opportunities, but at the same time have never felt like they are the person. They are the guy to step up and
the been there, not done that. That
is a much better way to put it, Joe. But I think with this team and the inexperience and the kind of lack of depth there is, at least one of them is going to have to step up. Ideally, all of them, but I think one of them has to prove that they are capable of leading and being a stabilizing figure. And I think one or two of them might do the opposite. And I think that's another thing to be excited about is, can these players sort of kick on to another level for the national team? Can they perform at a higher level and be a bigger persona, or are they going to kind of stay where they've been? Of those, Chris Richards is the one that I'm most excited by, because I think he has developed his game, he has improved, and I also think watching him for Palace and then going back and watching him for the U.S., I think he was trying stuff against Panama especially that his teammates weren't anticipating and weren't maybe making the right runs or moving into the right space, and so not alleviating his responsibility entirely. But I think watching Chris Richards again and seeing him as more of an interesting passer, a more progressive passer than I realized, has me excited.
Yeah, he is on my list of honourable mentions. I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. I'm still holding out hope that something will click for him for the US and he'll be Crystal Palace FA Cup winning Chris Richards for this team. And as I also said a couple of weeks ago, if you get a back four of Robinson, Ream, Richards and Dest all playing at their club best for the World Cup, all of a sudden I'm looking at a defensive line in a very different light. So that is the dream that kind of pans out. He is also, Richards, he's just come off the back of a long season at club level. You're talking 3,000 minutes in all competitions. So it is start given some of the other call-offs and also some of the comments that Pochettino has made on the aforementioned Landon and Tim Howard podcast that he's here in this squad, that he sees an opportunity to make an impression.
Unvarnished.
And then Johnny Cardoso, good season in Spain, apparently on his way to Atletico Madrid.
Yeah.
Which just makes you think there surely has to be a way for the US to get something out of this player. And his US career has been stop-start. He hasn't really had a real go at it. I think the last game he comes off with an injury, right? I can't even remember what game that was, but I remember him getting a start and then coming off fairly early with a knock.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
I just want more evidence of Johnny Cardoso, because there's a world where maybe you put him in the double pivot alongside Tyler Adams against a strong opponent, maybe against a Switzerland or a Turkey, and against the ball he gives you that platform to then attack open space. So yeah, I just would like to see a little bit more of Johnny to know for a fact whether or not he is a solution to something for this team.
There are a few players out there in the U.S. pool that when I watch them, I just don't get it. I just don't understand. And Joe Scally has been one of those players for a long time, to go back to him briefly, where I watch Joe Scally and I'm just wondering, how does he keep becoming the automatic starter at this spot when Dest is injured? How does he eat up all these minutes for Gladbach? And then Pochettino drops him from a roster and sort of I feel a little bit of vindication. Johnny Cardoso is another one of those guys where I watch him play for the U.S. I watch him play even for Batiste at times, although Graham's seen more of him than I have, so I'll defer there. But I watch him play and I don't get it, and then Atletico Madrid are in for him and I really don't get it, and I'm either about to be proved very, very right when he never plays for Diego Simeone, or very wrong, and I'll happily eat some crow on all of that. Yeah, congrats to Johnny if this move happens, because it's one of the biggest clubs in the world. Don't believe the U.S. have ever had a player at Atletico Madrid. And maybe he gets on really well with Simeone and does some of the destroyer stuff that he can do. It's just a shame that it seems like that's the best part of his game, and that's also the best part of Tyler Adams' game, unless the U.S. is going to lean all the way into that destroying stuff, which we don't have a lot of evidence of. It could be a little tricky there.
Counterpoint, Joe. If any club manager can take a square peg and try to get it into a round hole by screaming at it until it becomes a round peg, it's Diego Simeone. And I feel like that maybe could be the thing Johnny needs to add those wrinkles to his game that you would like to see. Man, I pity him bouncing back and forth between Diego Simeone and Mauricio Pochettino. I guess Pochettino at national team level is slightly more chill of the two, but I think there are certain incarnations of him that it's just a screaming tennis match back and forth. And it would be an entertaining one, but a loud one.
Yeah, I think there are dictators that are slightly more chill than Diego Simeone.
Yeah. I think you definitely need the meditation playlist after a day at the office with one of those guys, I would suggest.
How many players do you think, what percentage of the team do you think drives home just like yelling their rejoinders into the nothingness of like, no, you're the jerk, like on the way. It's got to be over 50%, right?
And your black suit's dumb. That's the other one.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so cool if I'd have said that.
Well, kind of like looking around at the same time to make sure he's not hiding in the back seat.
Which he is. Let's take another quick break. When we come back, we're looking forward to the sandwich doubleheader. Turkey and Switzerland coming up in the next few days. What we're watching out for, and we're going to learn a little bit about those opponents. Do join us then. Total Soccer Show. Welcome back to USMNT Weekly. Hey Taylor, this Saturday, 3:30 Eastern. What are you up to? You watching USA versus Turkey?
That is the plan. I will be, to full disclosure, I will be at a family get-together all day, so I'm going to try to sequester myself to watch the game and then record afterwards. But if I'm not on the show, it's because I failed at that. But I will be watching USA-Turkey at some point, and then I will definitely be rewatching USA-Turkey at some point. Because I think in the moment, there's always going to be the energy and the enthusiasm of watching the U.S. play and trying to figure out what they're doing. I think that second viewing, even if it's a poor performance, even if they lose, which I won't be surprised if they do, because Turkey are a good team, and they've got a lot of their core team still around, but I think you can still learn a lot from how this team is trying to play and which players are responding. So I am very excited, even if it's a friendly, and even if I don't expect the U.S. to look particularly great in either of these friendlies.
Okay. Graham, is there anything you're particularly looking out for in the Turkey game on Saturday?
Yeah, in both games and in the Gold Cup as well, I'll be interested to see what shape Poch ends up using, because as we mentioned when this roster was released, it's not a group with a lot of natural wingers, particularly if Haji Wright is potentially going to be a centre-forward in this team. Then I really don't know who's starting on the left side. Maybe it's Diego Luna and he just kind of drifts inside as he tends to do. Tillman as well, I guess, could play in a position similar to that on the left or on the right. There's a bit of versatility there. That could work in a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3. It could be a back three with wing backs. There's a good number of centre backs that could make that work. It's probably the strongest area of the team, so my eye will be drawn to that. And then just in terms of how the US plays, the US in the March window I thought were so anemic in an attacking sense. And so the two friendlies in particular against Turkey and Switzerland, which potentially they could be better prepped for the World Cup than the Gold Cup itself. When the US hopefully gets to the latter rounds, obviously you maybe get the games against Mexico or Canada, which would be decent prep for the World Cup, obviously competitive games. But Turkey and Switzerland are decent teams, and they're going to have to play against possession for periods, like Hakan Çalhanoğlu. If he starts for Turkey, he's going to have lots of touches of the ball. The US are going to have to sit deep. What that means on the flip side, with the ball, when the US do have those opportunities, is there's going to be open space to attack, and that's where I want to see the US make the most of that. As I say, against Canada and Panama in March, it was really, really anemic. So I want to see real conviction and purpose from the US going forward. And the positive side, the silver lining of this roster is in the attack, I think it is maybe it leans towards that kind of approach where you do have players that are decent in transition, like Haji Wright or Damien Downs, who we haven't really spoken much about and I haven't seen much of, given that he's been playing in the German second tier. But everything that I've read about him and seen of him, he has got lightning pace. He's 6'4", he's got physicality, so you kind of want to get him in behind. So there is a way where that approach could work for the US, and I want to see them lean into that.
With this Turkish national team, I think it's an interesting test, because I do not think of them as a particularly strong team when it comes to possession and possession build and creating consistent opportunities through possession. I think of them as a team that wants to kind of sit a little bit deeper, frustrate you, and then hit you on the break, and they definitely have the talent to do that. And then I think of a Turkish team that will outwork you and outfight you, and so it kind of invites the U.S. to have, I think, more possession than we might be expecting them to have. The question is, what do you do with it, and how do you make sure you don't kind of expose opportunities for Turkey to attack? But then at the same time, if you are a little bit complacent, if you are a little bit tentative, this is also a team that will body you around and knock you around and get stuck in. I think they are missing some of their usual starters. Ferdi Kariolu, the left back of Brighton, has been out for a while. Metahan Baltalja of Galatasaray, he's this 22-year-old center back. He has been a consistent starter for them. He won't be there either. So they're missing two of their back four, to my understanding. as
Those
I
are
said,
rookie numbers.
right? First time. And I don't think that midfield really inspires like a ton of creative confidence. Even if you have Hakan Çalhanoğlu in there, it's probably him, and I think sometimes it'll be him and Salih Özcan of Borussia Dortmund. And I think that can be a potent combination, but it also means that they're kind of building from deeper and launching balls long for somebody like Arda Güler of Real Madrid. We all know him. He's quite good. So too is Barış Yılmaz of Galatasaray, who wears number 9. Sometimes is a number 9, sometimes plays a little bit out wide and can play in a 2. But I think that is what I would expect, is a Turkish team that will maybe sit off or welcome the U.S. to have a little bit more possession at times, then we'll kind of go at them and press, make life difficult, kind of fight for loose balls, look for direct attacks when they can get them, probably look for set pieces as well.
Yeah, that midfield for Turkey may not be the most mobile on the planet. Let's also not pretend that it's not just straight up better than what the U.S. has on offer this summer. Like these tests, Saturday and Tuesday, in these 2 games against European opposition, are going to be the toughest test that the U.S. has this summer, at least until you maybe get to the Gold Cup final. The fact that these are friendlies is the only thing that makes me caveat that slightly, so there will be some rotation from one game to the next. I don't imagine that the U.S. will get Switzerland's absolute best 11 when they play them on Tuesday. They will probably get the Turkish national team's best 11 in this game. They're 18th in the world based off of ELO, and Switzerland are 24th in the world based off of ELO.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, these are good teams. Mexico technically is 1 spot ahead of Switzerland in those ELO ratings, at 23rd in the world. They're the highest rated CONCACAF team. But, I mean, the point stands. Like, these 2 games, even though they are friendlies, will give us better player evaluation opportunities than almost all of the Gold Cup games. So in these games, I'm watching to see which of the new guys impresses. And I'm also watching to see what Pochettino's pecking order is, right? You see the lineup come out on Saturday. Who's in the team? To Taylor's point from earlier, I don't feel like I've got a great grasp of that at the moment. I mean, even when the first choice group is together, I feel like I have a worse grasp of that than normal, which I know was your point from earlier. But when you take 5, guaranteed 5 outfield starters out of this team, yeah, there's tons of question marks. I think Diego Luna's probably going to start. Am I 100% sure? I suppose not. Are we going to see Berhalter or Sullivan, or who on earth is going to start at left back? Is Poch really going to trust Max Arfsten in this game? I don't know. So I am fascinated to see, like Graham said, what the shape is going to be for this team, what the actual personnel is going to be against teams that are strong and stronger than the U.S. will face for most of their windows before the World Cup period, and which of those new players actually impress in this window.
Yeah. Taylor, I also think of Switzerland as being particularly strong in midfield. Yeah. Abischer, Freuler, Xhaka. Does that mean this necessitates a similar approach as it would to Turkey as well, in terms of how the US will set up?
I would expect the Turkey game to be a bit more open and a bit more chaotic, and I think that means the US can get some chances. I think Turkey will have some chances themselves, and I think there will be lots of turnovers, is how I think that game is going to go. The Switzerland game, I think, has to be more defensive. I think it has to be more sort of give them the ball, we'll work really hard off the ball. Maybe that's pressing higher up. Maybe that's sitting off and trying to kind of bunker and then press in certain moments and then try to catch them on the break. But this Swiss team is the more intimidating of the two, in my opinion. I think they're a really interesting Swiss team at a really interesting time because they have a lot of the names we've come to expect. And this is my sort of cursory surface level understanding of Switzerland. I am by no means a Swiss expert, nor an expert on Swiss cheese. But they have Ricardo Rodriguez in there. There's Manuel Akanji. There's Granit Xhaka, Breel Embolo, Dennis Zakaria, to name some of the kind of names. But then there are also newer names that I think are threatening to break through, or already have in certain cases. And to kind of reinforce Joe's point of the difference in quality, like when we're talking about guys breaking through for the U.S., that might be Pat Agyemang, like having some goals for Charlotte and what comes next for him. Whereas I'm talking about Zeki Amdouni, who's a 24-year-old central attacking midfielder, can be a forward for Benfica. He scored 10 goals in 25 games for the Swiss, but he's not one who I think of as being kind of a potent attacking member of that usual starting 11. But I think very well could be. Same for Fabian Rieder. He's a 23-year-old central midfielder, can also play on the left wing in a 4-2-3-1. He was on loan at Stuttgart this past season, had a pretty strong season, goes back to Rennes. We'll see if they make that move permanent. But I think those are the types of names that I think make the Swiss team even more compelling, because it's a lot of 23 to 25-year-olds who all feel like they are in a stable position at club level at a good club, or are poised to kind of move up and see if they can then find that next level with an even like more top tier level club. And so I think for this Swiss team, I would expect much more possession from them, much more controlled possession at that. And the U.S., I think, doing a lot of firefighting is my expectation for how that game plays out.
Yeah, Switzerland are sneaky good and sneaky deep as well. So no Jan Sommer in this particular roster, of course, just played in the Champions League final. So they bring in Gregor Kobel as their starting goalkeeper, who, has a mistake in him, but we're still talking about the starting Borussia Dortmund goalkeeper from this season. So, yeah, Switzerland have some depth, and just looking through their squad, Taylor mentioned a couple of the names, or a few of the names that listeners might recognise. But that midfield and look, they might not start this midfield, but these are players who are in this squad. There's the potential for them to start. Granit Xhaka, Remo Freuler, and Michel Abischer. Yep. That's a strong midfield unit that the US could potentially be up against. And I remember how Switzerland played at the Euros when they came really close to knocking out England in the quarterfinals. They beat Italy 2-0 in the round of 16. They were really fluid in their 3-4-2-1 shape. And the majority of that team are included in this squad. So this is going to be a real test for the US.
Yeah, and since you mentioned two of those names, Graham, they are also remnants of the Bologna team that when you found out they played for Bologna, it was like, oh boy, okay, they're good then. They've got some skill to them, because Dan Ndoye would be the other one. Mm-hmm. He'll probably start on one of the wings. He's 24 years old, still plays for Bologna, and is quite good himself, and is a consistent starter for them. So you've got that sort of like lesser known, maybe less heralded talent, but still a very, very talented, strong midfield. And I think you named the first choice midfield at that.
Yeah. No Power Cube, sadly, of course, retired from international duty. Even though he's had
he's
a terrific season.
He's an incredible season. What was Chicago doing to him? He's 39 goal involvements in 34 games for title-winning Basel in Switzerland this year. So, yeah, he's still Power Cubing on.
He is indeed. Neutrality running through his veins still. Good to see from Mr. Shaqiri. My final question, Joe. Let's set some expectations for El Sandwichico, the sandwich doubleheader. Pininico. I'm still shopping that one. Does the scoreline matter in these games? How should we set our expectations for how these games will unfold?
No, the scoreline doesn't matter in these games. If it's the full group, maybe I have a different response to that. Between the fact that these are friendlies and we're going to see 6 subs apiece from all of these teams in every game, and the fact that the U.S. doesn't have their dudes available, like we talked about this last week, this summer is not about the U.S. going out there and winning a bunch of games. Like that would be a nice byproduct for Pochettino and co. But when you bring in this roster, when you decide that this is hot, take a load off summer, like that's not what this is about anymore. It's just not. So there's no way you can make a compelling argument that the scorelines matter in these games. Yeah, you don't want to get embarrassed, okay? But it's not like the scoreline is going to do a lot of heavy lifting in this game. I do want to make one more point, but it seems like Graham wants to jump in. So it's completely unrelated to what Ryan was asking me about.
All I was going to say, and you kind of touched upon it, Joe, there, the scoreline doesn't matter unless the US get thumped. And then all of a sudden that just adds to like the toxicity around. And I don't know how to quantify that, but I've seen enough of it to know that matters to some degree.
No, and it will matter a little bit to the players. Like that's not going to help the situation. But it's only really going to add to the toxicity in as much as we all let it add to the toxicity. Like if we are logical about all this and the U.S. lose 3-0 to Turkey on Saturday, which wouldn't be a surprise, by the way, when you look at this squad and you look at the U.S. squad, I wouldn't be shocked about that at all. It's not the most likely outcome, but it's totally possible. If we're like, oh, what does this mean about Pochettino and all of these, if we're asking all these questions that I think are nonsense, then yeah, we're going to add to that. But I don't think we need to do that. On a separate topic.
Joe, can I double down on that for a moment before you move us on? Like, I think to emphasize your point, because I'm right there with you. I think if they lose 3-0 and 4-0, it's going to be annoying. It's going to be a bummer. But I don't think that should be the objective. I think it should be, what are we learning? What have we learned from these games? Are these guys responding? Are they picking up what's being asked of them? And I think where we have answers to that is in the Gold Cup. You can be frustrated that that's where it has to be and have the feeling that maybe that's still not going to cement opinion. But if the U.S. responds to 2 losses by breezing through the group stage and breezing through to the final, you can see how those 2 losses were important in understanding things and kind of taking your lashes to learn the system and learn the style and then improve from there. I think by contrast, back to the Copa America of last summer where the friendlies leading in were getting just absolutely hided by Colombia and just not looking like they were trying anything. It wasn't the U.S. like rolling out a different system or a different style or trying a different approach. It was doing more of the same and looking really, really bad. And then what was the next? Like a draw with Brazil, but that still didn't really make it feel like they had learned any lessons from it. And then they were terrible in the tournament. I think then you can see those losses as mattering more because they didn't really learn anything. They didn't really try anything. And ultimately, they didn't learn or try anything in the tournament itself. If the U.S. learns from those losses and looks like a better, more cohesive team, then that was the important part of those friendlies.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is about individual player evaluation more than it is about the team, because at the end of the day, this is not the U.S. men's national team. Like this is not going to look like the roster that we see next summer. So there's only so much we can learn about the collective when the collective's not around. The last thing I wanted to say, looking forward to these friendlies and to this summer as a whole, I'm watching to see if Malik Tillman can be that dude. He just destroys teams for PSV, and more than that, he destroys bad teams for PSV. I know he had some goal contributions in the Champions League, but really, he's thrived at two teams in his career that have been dominant forces in their respective competitions, Rangers and PSV. He's coming off the best season of his career. We've never seen it with the U.S. men's national team. And I really haven't seen that much of it in the Champions League either. I hope he finds his PSV self with the U.S. because that would be really helpful for this group. 23 years old, entering the prime of his career. Is it going to happen for Malik Tillman or not? It kind of feels to me like this is the summer, because if it's not this summer, and maybe even more specifically, if it's not these games coming up quickly at the beginning and the end of the summer, I don't know if it's going to happen. I'm not writing off Malik Tillman at 23. I want to be clear about that. But we have not seen him make a consistent impact with the U.S. men's national team. The clock is ticking ahead of the biggest tournament that the U.S. will play probably in my lifetime. So the thing with Tillman is that he thrives off the ball. As I think is sort of a crashing runner. He's kind of McKennie-esque in that way in some ways, like very, very skilled at crashing in the box. And he can score a bunch of goals. He's done that the last two seasons. He did it with Rangers. I think he had double digits that season as well. His style of play, though, is not dissimilar to the number 9 conversation, where really he needs players around him to feed him. And the U.S. doesn't do that stuff. Like they're not tailoring their game around Malik Tillman. And even if they were, I don't think they have the skill players to actually do that effectively. So I think Tillman's a very interesting player, someone who can do some fun things. He can progress the ball a little bit. He's not a liability defensively at times, but he needs service to do and to be PSV Malik Tillman with the USMNT, and I just don't know that that's ever coming. So I'm not high on Malik Tillman, nor his odds of being an impact player with the U.S., but this feels like a really critical summer for him coming off of the best season of his career, where if there's a moment to show that you can be something more and impact the U.S. men's national team, yeah, it's this summer.
All right. USMNT Weekly. Consider yourself done. Thank you very much, listener, for joining us on this one. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show if you'd like more from us and to support us. Bonus episodes, videos, and access to our Discord where we'll be chatting USMNT all summer long, baby. But for now, Taylor Rockwell, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much indeed, my friend.
Joe Lowry, thank you, sir.
Go make that Sando, Ryan.
Let's Sando up. Graham Ruthven, ham and cheese, whatever you want, baby. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey.
Listener, thank you again for joining us on this here episode. We'll be back on the feed very shortly, but for now, bye.